Nice to meet you everyone. I'm Sun Jian, MA student at Yonsei University. This video is about the development of generative grammar with specific focus on minimization. First, introduction. As you know, the subject of syntax is a sentence, which can be divided into words and structures. A sentence will lose its meaning without words, and words will lose its positions without structures. Therefore, both words and structures are essential to form a sentence. Since Plato, discussions on sentences have been held by so many philosophers. In his dialogues, Cratylus and Sophist, Plato analyzes a sentence into onoma and rema, explaining that a sentence must have an onoma and a rema, that is, a noun and a verb. Aristotle also claims that a sentence is composed of onomas and remas as well, even explaining that rema is a marker of time, just like tense information. So, the discussion of language that began with Plato and Aristotle has continued to the generative grammar based on Chomsky today. Generative grammar is the most dominant syntactic theory today, so it is necessary to examine it in detail regardless of whether or not you support the theory. This is because being dominant means you have to know it. Therefore, this presentation aims to provide an overview of the development of generative grammar and understand the minimalist program advanced by Chomsky in 1995 with a specific focus on the concept of minimization. Now, we are going to overview the development of generative grammar, starting with the standard theory. In Chomsky 1957, the starting point of the standard theory, he points out the limitations of finite state grammar and presents phrase structure grammar and transformational rules. Chomsky compares humans to machines that generate grammatical sentences, but not ungrammatical sentences. In this machine, words combine to form a sentence through certain processes, and going through certain processes presupposes initial and final states. Here, as you can see in example 1, these certain processes are called rewriting rules, that is, PS rules. Since all humans are born with these rules, they can create structures by applying rewriting rules such as in example 1, and produce sentences that have phonetic forms by inserting lexical items. However, there is a limit to effectively explaining almost infinite number of sentences we produce only with PS rules. For example, in order to explain the agreement between subject and verbs, or to explain interrogative or negative sentences only through PS rules, a number of complex rules must be introduced, and each rule must be considered one by one to determine when these rules should be applied. To address this, Chomsky introduces a new concept called grammatical transformation. This is because it is much simpler in terms of description to explain the aforementioned phenomena by applying the transformational rules to a sentence that has already been made. To sum up, finite state grammar that was used before changed to be phrase structure grammar. And those phrase structure rules, required to explain agreement and interrogative and negative sentences, are minimized into few transformational rules. As a result, the rules for generating sentences are divided into 3 parts, as shown in example 2. These ideas are more advanced in Chomsky 1965. In Chomsky 1957, he focused on finding a system that most reasonably describes finite rules that can produce grammatical sentences. But in 1965, he emphasizes the innate language ability, the universal grammar, while opposes the language acquisition theory of empiricism and activism. In addition to the emphasis on universal grammar, Chomsky comes up with a more advanced theory. Grammar as a whole set of rules is divided into three parts: syntactic, semantic, and phonetic components. Here, the semantic and phonetic components are mechanisms for interpretation and are not involved in sentence generation. And the syntactic component is divided into base and transformational component. The base creates deep structures through PS rules and lexicon, and the meaning of the deep structure is interpreted by semantic component. After that, transformational rules are applied, and the surface structure is created, which soon has a phonetic form by the phonetic component. In addition, in Chomsky 1957, lexical items were inserted by PS rules, but in Chomsky 1965, the lexicon is set separately, and lexical items are inserted by the word insertion rules after the phrase structure is created by PS rules. On the other hand, in Chomsky 1957, Chomsky divides a sentence into three parts: terminal morpheme strings where the PS rules are applied, kernel sentence strings where transformational rules are applied, and derived sentence strings where optional transformational rules are applied. In Chomsky 1965, however, he divides a sentence into two parts: deep structures where transformational rules are yet applied, and surface structures where transformational rules are already applied. The PS rules postulated in the standard theory are clearly simpler in terms of description than previous finite state grammar. But the number of rules is never small because all categories are described by rewriting rules respectively. In Chomsky 1970, however, Chomsky presents a prototype of the expert theory that can further minimize the existing PS rules based on similar properties of nouns and verbs. As can be seen in example 3, each of John, proved, and theorem in 3a corresponds to John's, proves, and theorem in 3b, both seeming like a sentence having a subject, a verb, and an object. Based on these observations, linguists of the time tried to explain nominalization in connection with the sentence structure by finding a way to apply the characteristics of a sentence to a noun category, advancing abstract theory and lexicalist theory. Among these two theories, Chomsky supported the abstract theory, and along the way, today's expert theory came out. He explains that if one of the features of a word is be, as in example 4, the phrase becomes a verb phrase. On the other hand, as in example 5, if one of the features of a word is an, the phrase becomes a noun phrase. Like this, Chomsky reflects the characteristics of the word itself, which was important in lexical theory, and also shows that noun, adjective, and verb phrase can be generated from the generalized rules, such as in example 6. This is the prototype of today's expert theory, which minimizes numerous existing PS rules into just 3 lines of generalized rules. In other words, category-specific PS rules have been generalized to category-neutral rules. In addition to the minimization of PS rules, the intermediate level assumed in the expert theory also solved the problems of previous phrase structure grammar, which had only word level categories and phrase level categories, and can explain more linguistic phenomena. For example, the previous PS rules were impossible to distinguish between complement, adjunct, and specifier in terms of structure. However, by postulating intermediate level, complement and has combined to form intermediate levels, and these intermediate levels and specifiers combine to form phrasal level. In addition, by explaining that adjuncture combined with the intermediate levels to create the same level without forming a larger level, it is possible to distinguish between complements, adjuncts, and specifiers in terms of structure. Although more linguistic phenomena can be explained through this generalization, all generalization inevitably have overgeneralization problem. For example, since the expert theory consists of category-neutral rules, it can even produce rules that produce ungrammatical sentences, such as VP, 2A, and FP. Therefore, after Chomsky, many researchers tried to solve this problem through several constraints, and as a result, the theory became more sophisticated. Next, in the 1980s, the era of the government and binding theory began with Chomsky 1981. In Chomsky 1981, Chomsky explains grammar by dividing it into a rule system and a principle system. The principle system consists of several sub-theories, including expert theory, government theory, data theory, binding theory, etc., and is developed into a more general and a simpler system. Like this, Chomsky explains the universal grammar through several fixed principles and considers the particular grammar as the process of determining the values of parameters, once again minimizing the theory. On the other hand, in a rule system, transformational rules are generalized into a single alpha movement. This is possible because transformational rules can be generalized based on their commonality. For example, V and I movement are transformational rules applied to X, while MP and WH movement are applied to XP. Therefore, it is possible to generalize these rules to X and XP movement respectively. Furthermore, since X movement and XP movement can be generalized once again, an extremely generalized rule called alpha movement can be postulated. However, as previously explained, generalization inevitably leads to the problem of overgeneralization. Alpha movement can move anything anywhere. Therefore, instead of moving verb to I position, incorrect transformation may be made, such as moving verb to noun position. Therefore, with the advent of alpha movement, the reason for movement and where to move are explained through various constraints. Meanwhile, another minimization occurs in Chomsky 1986. In Chomsky 1981, PS rules create a structure that violates endocentricity constraints such as S verb to CNS and S to MP, I, BP, like in example 7. This is because sentence is not a category maximally projected by a head, but a semantic category. Thus, we truly generalize all categories into expert structure through the following observations. Both 8A and 8B correspond to S based on Chomsky 1981, but 8A has the present tense while 8B has no tense. In other words, in order to form a sentence, not only subject and verb, but also tense is required. Chomsky proposes to view S as IP and expert as CP. In other words, the expert theory expands into another category, inflection and complementizer, and truly achieves generalization. In summary, explaining language system became simpler with principles and parameters. Several transformational rules are minimized into a single alpha movement. And finally, expert theory truly achieves generalization with the advent of I and C. And finally, in Chomsky 1995, he presents a research method which brings economics and minimality to the fore. Since language is a cognitive activity, analyzing language system is like identifying cognitive system. Therefore, in order to truly analyze language, it is reasonable to study language as a part of the cognitive system under the biolinguistic perspective, rather than establishing theoretical devices confined to linguistics as before. Therefore, the theories presented after Chomsky 1995 aim to minimize the theory by discarding many concepts, rules, and principles presented in GB theory discussed earlier, putting conceptual necessity to the fore. First, deep structure and surface structure are no longer assumed. In the GB theory, both deep and surface structures, logical and phonetic forms were assumed. However, since all languages are made up of sound and meaning, language only requires an articulatory perceptual system that deals with sound information, and a conceptual intentional system that deals with semantic information. Therefore, language can be sufficiently explained through phonetic and logical forms, and previous deep and surface structures are discarded as redundant concepts that do not satisfy conceptual necessity. Second, all structures are created by bottom-up mechanisms through merge operation. The maximum projection categories, intermediables, and heads that were assumed in the expert theory are no longer used, and XP, expert, and X are treated as surplus information that can be derived from its location and are discarded. Therefore, only words are needed to create bottom-up structures, and all the concepts and rules related to projection that were previously assumed are replaced by merge operation, thereby minimizing the theory. Third, the subject of all syntactic operations is lexical feature. In Chomsky 1995, the features are classified as follows: category features, phi features, case features, and strong F. These features are divided into interpretable features and uninterpretable features. Uninterpretable features must be interpreted through feature checking in accordance with Chomsky's full interpretation principle. Therefore, it can be seen that the work of syntax is to make it interpretable by checking and deleting these uninterpretable features. So far, we have looked at how the previous GB theory has been minimized under the minimalist program. Sentence generation is no more explained by expert theory, but by feature checking system, generating bottom-up structures with merge and movement. After the advent of the minimalist program in 1995, it has undergone another change since Chomsky 2001. In 1990s, the subject of the theories under the minimalist program was the whole sentence, but in Chomsky 2001, it changed to a smaller unit called phrase. In addition, Chomsky explains that syntactic operation is applied to phrases with cyclicality, and accordingly, the logical form assumed in the earlier theory is also discarded, and grammar becomes a more minimized system. In addition, as phase impenetrability condition (PIC) was established, elements in the phase that had already undergone syntactic operations cannot participate in the operations for another phase. This is in line with the economics pursued by minimalist program, in that it reduces the cognitive burden required for calculation. Meanwhile, in 1990s, movement and agreement were explained by feature checking and attract F theory, but the agreement theory presented in Chomsky 2001 discarded these theories and explained movement through agreement. Under the feature checking theory, lexical items were considered to be introduced to syntactic component with all the morphological features. In the agreement theory, however, uninterpretable features are considered unspecified. Therefore, movement occurs by forming a probe-girl association by finding a girl to determine the value of the uninterpretable features. In summary, in the 2000s, the theories under the minimalist programs are more advanced in terms of economics and minimality than in the 1990s. With the postulation of phase, cyclicality, and PIC, it reduced the cognitive burden by narrowing the target of syntactic operations from the whole sentence to the phase. In addition, The language system is described more simply by explaining movement only through agreement theory instead of feature checking and attract app theory. Finally, conclusion. This video introduces the philosophical and theoretical backgrounds of generative grammar and presents the core concepts of syntactic theories existing under the generative grammar framework. It also discusses which aspects of its theory have been changed to achieve minimality. Since minimization revisions had already been made to the standard theory, the extended standard theory, and the government and binding theory, this video concludes that the minimalist program is not completely different from other theories, but rather an extension of them, which particularly emphasizes the economics and minimality of theory. Therefore, under the minimalist approach, we will develop a better theory, as we have done before, thinking about how to better explain universal grammar and language as a part of the cognitive system. These are the references, and thank you for watching the video.